some struggles this week of any sort. It might even be small. Fully understand. It is the Sunday before Christmas, so that means usually pastors across the country are going to tell about the great birth and all the gifts and the taxes and you name it. I'll start out with a quick verse and then we're going to go a different direction, because that wasn't my week in preparation to get ready for Christmas. My week was way different. My week was filled with my dad going to the emergency room, me having to cover for him during the busiest week of the year for our school, which is our Christmas performances. Huge success on Wednesday night for our preschool and our kindergarten and our elementary. And then turn around, I have a basketball tournament Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week, so I have to coach. In the meantime, my dad's in the hospital, while my mother-in-law is across town in another hospital. And then when she finally gets out, then her car breaks down, and she has to go to the doctor's. I mean, this week is like every time I turn around, my family seemed not to be able to catch a break. Now, the amazing thing is, if you were around me all week, except for my basketball team yesterday, I was handling everything pretty good. Thursday, Friday good, Huck? Brady, Thursday, Friday good? Well, Saturday not so much. That's your guys' fault, by the way, on Saturday. But Saturday, I was handling things really, really good until we got to Saturday. And to be honest with you, I was actually handling things well Saturday. I just didn't want my players to know that. Now, I've been asked all week, how in the world, how are you doing, Coach? How are you doing? How's the family doing? And I keep telling people that I'm okay. And nobody seems to believe me that I'm okay. Your dad's in the hospital. 5 years ago, he could have died. Yeah, it's part of life. And I said on Wednesday night at the Christmas performances, and I was genuine in saying this, is at some point in my life, I will have to deal with my dad dying. And if it was this week, I will have to deal with it. But I understand where he's going. Amen. So I honestly had a peace. 5 years ago when my dad went through it, I was adjusting to that fact. And I knew where he was going, but honestly, I struggled with it. The human instinct. My dad's going to die. What am I, I'm going to left with a lot of responsibility. There was a lot of self-doubt. Great, I'm going to be in charge for 2 months, and the church is going to fall apart, and the schools, everybody's going to disenroll, and the vans are going to be stolen, and the building's going to be burnt, but I wouldn't have paid the fire insurance on time. I could not sleep 5 years ago. And I remember my dad telling me back then, and he was struggling, you're going to do fine. And there was sort of a commie at that point. And my brother Mark's like, my brother Mark tells me, I got your back. In other words, I'll cover the office stuff. You just go and cover being out in front of people. And at that point, 5 years ago, I started to understand, you know what? If my security is truly in Christ, and I know the end result, then why am I going to be bogged down by worry? I will have to deal with emotion. If my dad and mom, once they pass away, which is the cycle of life, I will be sad. I will have days where I'm in the woods and I'm going to miss my dad, just like I go to the woods now and miss my grandpa. There's going to be days. We go through that. That's human instinct. But for me to sit there and dwell about it every single day, that just makes my life absolutely miserable. And so this week, my focus was really making sure my dad was okay, because I was fine. And the reason I was fine is because of this passage I have been focusing on all week, understanding that God's in control regardless of the circumstances. So we're going to start out this morning in Luke chapter 1, verses 37 and 38. Luke chapter 1, verses 37 and 38. This is about as much as a Christmas story as you're going to get this morning. Luke chapter 1, verse 37 says, "For with God nothing shall be impossible." Boy, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Without God, or with God, nothing is impossible. And I'm going to start there with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you this morning for the opportunity to come and worship you. We thank you for the songs that have been sung this morning. We thank you for the people that have got up on a Sunday morning to come put you first in their life. Lord, I ask that you'll be with this sermon. Help it be a blessing to somebody. I do understand that it's been a blessing to me, but I ask that it'll help at least one person. Well, thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen. So, verse 37 says, For with God, nothing shall be impossible. Then verse 38 says, And Mary said, Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word. And the angel departed from her. Now, once again, verse 38, And Mary said, Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word. Now, everybody understand what this passage of verse was. She's being approached by the angel. I got a proposition for you. Will you carry Christ in your stomach? Dummy down terms. Now, she had a choice. And we know that if you analyze this, she had a choice. God gives us a choice in life. It's what we do with that choice. Mary could have said, no, I'm good, move on to the next house. There's a great lady next door. She's a servant. She's been on her knees for 24 hours straight. She's the greatest lady I've ever met. Go choose her. But instead, Mary said, no, whatever your will, I'm the handmaid, whatever your will, I'm going to do it. Our first thing in life becomes a choice. How do we deal with things? It's a choice. I had a rough basketball weekend because our guys went 0-3 in the tournament. Yeah, I'm not a very good coach. 0-3. And the whole time led us to day 3 of the tournament. And day 3 of the tournament, Huck, what was my biggest frustration? We didn't have fun and we didn't play good together. I think I used the exact phrase, I didn't come here to babysit today. I wasn't worried about the score. And my guys know I do not like to lose, so that's not even a question. They all understand that losing is not very fun for Coach Gunter. But the one thing yesterday that I was so upset with is I felt like a babysitter trying to convince guys to play. Like my dad convincing people to go to church. Like my dad trying to convince people to serve God. Like my dad trying to convince people to put Christ first, and man, everything else is a lot easier. That's what I felt like yesterday. And with the week that I had, the only one thing that I had as a getaway is to hang out with 16 great young men and an assistant coach during the basketball game, and I didn't have to worry about anything else. Because during that time, my only responsibility was those guys in basketball. That was it. I didn't have to worry about my dad being in the hospital. Another concern this week for me, as well as Coach Hernandez, is his younger brother had surgery this week. That was another thing weighing heavy around here. During the game, I did not have to worry about any of that stuff. At all. You know, Roman coached. He had his first surgery like 2 days before we had our last football game. And the guy shows up to our football game and coaches from the sidelines with an incision that just got closed up. And didn't take any pain meds because he didn't want it to mess with his thinking during the game. And as the game got on, you could see that he was hurting more and more. But if you would have talked to Coach Roman at the time, he was like, I'm okay. Because he was able to focus on the game and sort of put all the miseries of the surgery and the pain behind him. Was it still there hurting him? Oh, you better believe it. But was it an escape for a little bit for the game? Yes, it was. And this week, I had so many things I was worried about. I mean, Roman's not even my brother. And I was worried. I mean, I texted you. I'm like, hey, can you give me a report on Roman? I knew the surgery was coming up soon. My dad's in the hospital. My mother-in-law was in the hospital. My wife was a little bit stressed. Just a tad. She doesn't get stressed too often. But my wife was a little stressed. Which as a husband, you know, if the wife is stressed, your world's not doing so hot. Because they're the calm amongst the storm, usually in the household. So when they become a little bit of the storm, You want to run and hide, which gives you more issues because they want you right there. And so it was a busy, busy week. Yesterday I just wanted to I just want to hang out with the guys. That's all I wanted to do. And in the locker room before the game, the guys, I said, you guys ready? Yeah, coach, we're ready, we're ready. And in the fourth quarter, I looked at my assistant coach and I'm like, it was a lie. They were not ready. Now here's the amazing thing. In the style in which we play, as a fan, they see layups being given up, but you can tell if our guys are doing really well. And it's called a stance. I preach it constantly to my players on the bench. I know when they are not producing or giving me their all, or the mental game has gotten them. They start feeling their body hurting. They don't think they have a chance. They don't trust their teammates. They let life get to them in that short amount of moment. I can tell every single time by their stance. Now, Will, what is our stance supposed to be? Our feet must be 6 inches outside of our shoulders. Minimum. Every time. Minimum. That's our stance. What else should we be? Knees bent. What should our feet be doing, Huck?
Quiver.
Quiver. Brady, why do we want to have our feet quiver? Body in motion? Station motion. I constantly tell my guys, stance, 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 stance. Because if I don't see my guys with their feet 6 inches outside of their shoulders, knees bent, in a quiver, because the body in motion stays in motion, and I start seeing them come up and stand, I know that the mental side of the game has gotten them. Every single time. It's my indicator. Now here's the amazing thing. It's not like 5 guys all at once stand up. It's one at a time. When we are playing extremely well, I see 5 guys all like this and moving. And you can just put a line on the top of their heads. They're all active. They're anticipating. They're reacting. But when I see one guy stand up, I go, uh-oh. Because if one guy stands up, then other guys start losing faith. And the next guy starts standing up. And then we don't have a chance at a steal. Now the reason guys stand up is because their mind starts messing with them. Day 3 of the tournament, they were extremely tired. All of them had long weeks. We had one young man on our team that stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning. My guys are laughing. Now he stayed up for a good reason. He was over at Bayside Church taking down their Christmas program stuff on Friday night. That's a great reason. But even more importantly for him, if you're physically tired, you better be mentally tough. And he was the first one to stand up, and then the next guy stood up, and then the next guy stood up. And the whole time I'm telling the guys, stance, and just go out and have fun. See, life is about choices. You can either let the world get to you mentally and start standing up, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to take on anything that comes in my way. I'm going to get in a great stance and be prepared for it and react to anything that comes. Because the reason I want my basketball players in a great stance is I want their reactions. I want their reactions to be instinctive. Because if they're instinctive, then we get steals. If we're instinctive, they're faster. If they're instinctive, they're not worrying about themselves, they're worried about their teammates. But it starts with a choice. And this week I had a major choice. Let my dad going down on Monday and Tuesday, which was extremely scary. Let my dad go down on Monday and Tuesday and go ahead and come out of my stance and start worrying about worldly stuff. Or I could get back in my stance understanding God's in control and not let the mentality of the world or the circumstances dictate my attitude. But how many times do we do that? Go to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. And this is where I went to quite a few times this week. Chapter 4, verse 4 says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. He says it twice. In case you're dumb and you don't understand it the first time, he repeats it. I yell nonstop at my players in the huddle, stance, because I know it's more of a mental thing than anything else. Stance. They're looking for great words of wisdom and X's and O's, and I'm telling them, stance. If you get in your stance, Huckab was laughing because he knows. If you're in a proper stance, we'll react and we'll go faster. Yesterday was the worst game we had played all year. What was the final score? 92 to 85. We only lost by 7. But if you would have looked at my guys, it looked like we had lost by 100. At halftime, I walked in and told the guys, I'm not going to give you X's and O's. You go in your stance, you go out and have a great time. Let's enjoy this time together. I'm going to stop coaching. Now, I didn't stop coaching, but I chose a different approach. Instead of sitting on the end of the bench, I went to the middle and hung out with my assistant coach. Right in the middle. Now, my guys will tell you, I still was coaching. But my point of doing that was the guys were focusing on me and I was getting mad. Because we weren't having any fun. I knew that my guys mentally were done. And so guess what I decided to do? Take their focus off of me being upset, get in the middle and let them figure it out. Now, not a selfish giving up on them. Some of them might have thought it. But I really wanted them to understand that because your mind has allowed you to get so bad right now, you can quickly adjust, fix the head, fix your mentality, and get back into this ballgame. And slowly, one by one by one, I started seeing guys go back into stance. And one of the players asked me, one of my bench guys asked me, Coach, why are you sitting in the middle? I said, well, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to have some fun hanging out with Coach Converse. Because we had lost that. We had lost that mental edge. We had lost that point of rejoicing. And again, I say rejoice. Now, the reason I keep up bringing the basketball analogies is because it basically summed up my week. If I allowed the things that were going on in life or circumstances to dictate my attitude, I have no chance of success in anything. Because I'm going to be at home in bed, depressed, and never be able to get out. There's no way. I had 2 parental figures in the hospital this week. I lost 3 basketball games as a coach. Everything tells me stay in bed. It's a lot better. You don't have to deal with life. But the Bible tells me, first I have a choice. Mary had a choice. She accepted. Amen. Second, my job is to rejoice no matter what goes on. And Paul understands that even though he's in a jail, you might not be smart enough to hear him, so he repeats it again and he says, rejoice. Verse 5, it says, let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. I pulled a bunch of different versions. The NIV says, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. New Living Translation said, let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. English Standard Version said, let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. The Berean Study Bible, some of these I've never looked at in my entire life. And just, man, these are all great applications. Let your gentleness be apparent to all. The Lord is near. The New American Standard said, let your gentle spirit be known to all men. Philippians 4:5 says, let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. First of all, you have a choice. Second is you're supposed to rejoice in all that. Rejoice when you're having a rough week. And third, make it known to all that you're rejoicing. Let them see your gentleness. Let them see let them see outside that you're handling this stuff. Don't keep it quiet. When people came to me this week asking me, how are you doing? Well, I wasn't going to bottle it up and be depressed. I said, I'm doing fine. My family's doing okay. We're getting frustrated at my dad telling everybody he's coming out of the hospital tomorrow. But the reality is I'm doing okay. Why? Because verse 5 says, in everything that goes wrong, let those people around you see in moderation, see your gentleness, see Christ coming out of you. Why? Because if you let the world know, then it also helps here. It's like they say the first thing for depression that you're supposed to do is supposed to go out and exercise. Why? Because if you exercise, it starts putting those, what do they call those? Yeah, endorphins, and makes you start feeling better. It's the same thing. Let people around you know that you can handle it. We go down to verse 6. It says, be careful or anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Worry. The definition of worry is give way to anxiety or unease. It allows one's mind to dwell on difficulty or troubles. Now this week, I honestly decided I was not going to worry. I was not going to worry about my dad. Doesn't mean I'm not there. Doesn't mean all of a sudden Dad's going to be healthy. But I'm not going to let the anxiety overtake me. And one of the things that I saw inside of the hospital this week is how much the mind can play tricks on you. If you're not careful, your mind can devour your life, as you guys know. And so first thing I did this week is I turned to these passages of verse and I said, I'm not going to allow worry. Whatever happens to my dad, I'm going to deal with it day by day. So when people were, how are you doing? I was doing great because I wasn't going to sit there and let the mental side go. Because I understood that God was in control. Now once again, that doesn't mean that I live in some fairy town world. But if you understand and grasp the concept that number one, it's our choice. Number two, we're supposed to rejoice. Number three, we're supposed to let people see that we're rejoicing. Then we can understand that we can let worry go. Because if you can't let worry go, your whole week's ruined. I sat back on on the bench this week, and I said, God, please explain to me why we are losing. I already knew X's and O's of why we were losing. But what is the biggest picture? Of any week that God should have blessed me would be this week. We should have taken the tournament. I serve God every day. Can you give me a little physical thing that says, hey, you're really, really good? Just a little pat on the back? No, my JV team got destroyed in their tournament. My elementary team, the one that reported, lost. They played really well, but they lost. My varsity team lost 3 really, really close games. I'm like, of all the weeks, God, could you allow me to win just this week? We'll lose next week. Just this week, let me win. But that's not how God has it. Supplication, definition. The act of asking or begging for something earnestly and humbly. Does that verse say? It says, in everything by prayer and supplication, or the act of asking or begging for something earnestly and humbly. Take it to God. Honestly, that's what I did. I sat on that bench this week with everything going on, and a little prayer request as I put a next rotation in. I said, God, help me see why this is going on. By the end of the tournament, I had one of my players I had to approach one of my players due to some circumstances, basketball stuff. I had to approach one of my players and said, hey, I need to put you at point guard. And the kid finally said yes. Wonder who that was. This player is probably one of our best by far. And he really hasn't wanted to be point guard too much. He's over there smiling. But we need the ball in his hands. Because he's one of the best we got. So if I put the ball in the best player's hands and allow the best player to make the decisions, whether he shoots or passes or goes in for a layup, if I put the ball in the best player's hands, we're going to have a better chance as a team. And I think all the teammates would agree, correct? But we couldn't get the ball in the player's hands. And on the final day of the tournament, I went to the player and said, hey, I got to put you in at point guard. Okay. Had that been that player's response earlier in the year, Huck? Brady? Had that been the response earlier in the year? Will, had that been his response earlier in the year? You don't know, I'm talking about Brady over there. Finally, at some point, Brady's like, I got it. And yesterday, we lost. We got some work to do. But Brady ended up 17 points, and was the man. It wasn't perfect. Made a couple turnovers. Did I stress about the turnovers? He did. I didn't. I looked at the end result. If the ball's in Brady's hands, in 2 months from now, we're going to be a better team. Because his other point guard buddy over here is already playing tremendously well. So if I'm looking towards the end result, I can deal with whatever mishaps are happening in the current day. Now, how does that apply to life? This week, really, really rough, and God started showing the end result, and I didn't have to worry about the current day. And with that, I was able to deal with it. And then the end of that verse says request. You have to make your request be known to God. It doesn't say general. It's talking about specific. Specific requests. God, my dad's in the hospital. It's going to be a long week. I need you to give me the biggest smile I possibly can all week. Because on Wednesday night, I got to deal with a bunch of elementary parents. God, I have a basketball tournament coming up this week. I need you to give me the patience to deal with guys just in case we lose. Because I understand that last year we lost 2, but we ended up in the section title game. We ended up in the championship game. I also understand as a coach, we played some of these same teams last year. And last year, some of these teams we lost to by 55 points. This year, we lost to them by 9. I understand that's huge progress. I understand the end result. But give me the patience specifically, Christ, to deal with my players because they might lose, but we have to stay towards the goal of the end of the year. Because if we're in the championship game at the end of the year, guess what? They're not going to remember December tournament. 3 weeks from now, when my dad is fully healthy, I'm not going to remember much of the anxiety of this week. The problem is getting through this week. Go to Philippians 4:7. It says, "And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Now verse 7. And the peace of God, if you do this, first of all, it's a choice. Second, rejoice in everything. Third, let everyone see it. Fourth, be specific in your prayer request. And if you do this, it says, the peace of God will be with you. Man, that's a nice thing to have. If I understand God's in control, I can deal with everything He puts in front of me. How do you know that God's with you? When you specifically make your request known to God, constantly, not just once, constantly. And all of a sudden you have a calm peace about you. It doesn't mean your dad got out of the hospital or Romans 100% yet. It doesn't mean that you've won a tournament. But you have that calm peace about you. That's when you know God has answered. We don't know God's answered because the problem's solved. We know that God's answered is when we're able to deal with it. And isn't that most of the battle? He says, you do this, the peace of God comes. Now we drop down. It says, all these things in verse 8, and if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Once you get the peace of God, what do? You think on these things. And what things do you think of? Excuse me. You think on pure, lovely, good. Don't dwell on the negative. Yes, the cancer could have hit, or not the cancer, but yes, the infection could have hit my dad's heart. Yes, my dad could die. If that's all I thought of this week, I would have been in tears all week. But I chose to give it to God specifically, have a peace about it, and deal with every problem when it came up. Well, we don't know that it's to His heart yet, so we'll deal with it when we get there. So I'm going to show the outward that Christ is working, and we move on. Now, here's the amazing thing. It says, those things, verse 9, those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do. Paul's saying this, a guy that's sitting in prison. He's giving you all this advice. You have a choice. What are you going to do with it? All these things. He says, if you followed my advice and do it, then the God of peace shall be with you. What's the do part? Stop worrying. It's not going to help. It's going to make life worse. Put in God's hands. Stop worrying. Now here's the amazing part. In the end of this verse, it says, and the God of peace shall be with you. Now remember, I just said that if you put it in God's hands, you'll have the peace of God. But you go down and he says, if you focus on these positive things, if you put it in my hands, if you constantly pray about it, and I give you that peace, if you do all of those things, it says, then the God of peace shall be with you. It's not until God gives you the peace, but it's not until you follow and apply every single day do you have God with you. Those are two different things. We have a thing on our basketball team called the staggered stance. Our guys on the back end of our press use it. And a staggered stance is the same thing as our previous stance, but we want the guys turned sideways. 6 inches outside of our shoulders. We want them in a quiver, constant motion, body in motion, stays in motion. But we want them sideways because most of the time that a team is coming at them and we're playing defense, there's 2 guys coming at them. And we want our guy on the back end in a staggered stance so he can guard the guy coming with the ball, but also be aware of the guy behind him, because there's 2 guys. And we want him constantly moving, and we call it fake and feinting. In other words, fake that you're going to get that guy, fake that you're going to get the guy behind, and leave these 2 guys wondering. And at the last minute, when the first guy with the ball makes the decision that he's going to go all the way to the basket, then we're going to switch over and we're going to guard him specifically. But we cannot go too early, because if we go too early, they're going to quickly pass to the other guy and score easy. So it's got to be the right timing. Now the reason this is so important is because we have trust in our teammates that we're going to cover that other guy. We call that a chaser lane. And the guy that covers the chaser lane is a guy that's usually coming off of the press, and his job is to sprint 100% to cover his buddy and get between the ball and that other guy. And if our guy sprints to help his friend out and gets to that chaser lane, usually 2 out of 5 times we're going to steal the ball. But the problem is, a lot of times our guys don't get in a stance properly, and they go and they try to take on both like this by themselves. And when our guys, Huckabee will tell you because he's on the back end of the press, when they turn and face, there's no chance we ever have to stop them. But when we're in a staggered stance and we trust that our teammate's going to come and cover the chaser lane, amazing things happen. The happiest I was in the tournament is Will Robinson over here covered the chaser lane and stole the ball. And I was pumped. I was pumping my fist on the sidelines. And I thought, as I was preparing for this morning's sermon, I thought, boy, isn't that us? If we're not in staggered stance to prepare and we don't trust that God's going to cover the chaser lane, a lot of times we try and go to tackle them both on our own, and we go straight up, stand, and we're not prepared whatsoever. I pulled a song which you guys probably know a lot, and it says, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard tender whispers of love in the dead of night. And you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we are all searching for answers only you can provide, because you know just what we need before we say a word. Anybody recognize those? Here's the chorus. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Probably one of the most popular songs on Christian radio right now. But a lot of times we focus on the chorus and we don't focus that, you know what, there's more in the verses that say put your trust in God. Proverbs 3:5 is the verse I hung on to all week. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 says, lean not on your own understanding. How do you deal with the mind? Make a choice. Rejoice in everything. Let everyone see it. Be specific with your prayer requests. Focus on just, pure, lovely, and good. And then do. And if you do, you'll understand that it's His understanding and not ours. Every head bowed, every eye closed.